Welcome back to more Pulling the Trigger. We've got our next episode going through all of a Trigger series. Just last episode, we went through the very, very long haul that was Darling in the Franxx for 3.5 hours. So it was a pretty big. We were thinking about trying to fit this one into that one, but of course, like immediately once we got to the end, we're like, nah, we're not going to do that.
Funny.
but this time we have another different robot series by Trigger that came out the same year as Frank. Actually, like half a year. 3 months because Franxx ended in June of 2018, and then this started in October of 2018. So yeah, just a few months after Franxx ended, this new mecha robot anime series came out, and while it didn't initially reach the same level of hype as Franxx, it has far succeeded it to the point that, honestly, other than Kill la Kill, this is probably Trigger's, at least online, Trigger's most popular and well-received series. SSSS period Gridman.
There you go. Yeah, and like you said, it was right after Frank. So I remember when it first came out, like, we were all very freshly in wounds of what Franxx had decided to give us in terms of its plot, its story. And I know a lot of people, when they saw the trailers for Gridman, because it is one of those modern animes that uses CGI extensively, in a very good way. Like, if you've seen like a screenshot of this show and you're like, I don't know, let me tell you right now, that opinion's wrong. Your whole preconceptions, all of your prejudices there are wrong. Watch this show and enjoy it. But no, this is definitely one of the animes, if, like you said, if not one of their most popular, this is definitely one of their shows where they saved anime. Like, this Gridman, SSS as Gridman, fucking rocked everything. Like, this show is, kind of to date this video in the FTCR timeline, like, we recently talked about Sonic Generations, which is a game that's hailed as, a love letter to all things Sonic and yada yada yada. But here's the thing. All the gripes that people have for stuff like that, for like love letter type media, the reason people would have any type of criticism on it is because shit like SSS Gridman exists, where not only is it openly a love letter to all things that it's based on, but it elevates not only its own genre, but the genre it's based on. Just because we're sort of now getting into the little gray area of, mecha, giant robot, Gatai robot / tokusatsu giant superhero man, because in all actuality, I mean, like, the function and the form of a giant superhero man and a giant robot, it all serves the same thing. You get giant flashy battles, you get giant enemy robots or aliens, depending on the series there. But I think but it's all still in the same vein of, this was a project that the animators at Trigger were passionate about, and they put all of that passion into this, and this show bleeds references. Like, this show is literally that meme. How many Gridman, Ultraman references are in this show? The answer is yes. They're, like, everything, like, down to the food is a reference to everything in a show that came out in the 90s, and to me, it blows my mind. And the fact that it sticks the landing, and it's like, it lands the landing and then fireworks shoot off in the background after they stick the landing. It's that perfect. But the show kind of has its own history as well too. This is with SSSS, and we're gonna. I'm just because with this show being that love letter, it's basically on record that they really wanted this whole series that has now started becoming a universe. That's sort of when we get later on to discussing Dynazenon, that now we have a universe on our hand, which is not something we've really had too much with the previous Trigger works. Like, they are all in their own universe that all exist in the Trigger universe that can all be visited, but there's really not like much continuation from one series to the next. But Gridman is meant to set that up, at least animation wise, because it pulls so heavily from the 1993 Hyper Agent Gridman show. But the show that came out in 2018 wasn't actually their first Gridman project. It's kind of similar to Little Witch Academia, how previously they had done an animated short, and then just due to the success or due to the hype and the praise that went along with that short, it sort of led into the collaboration and the funding that led to, you know, the main project. So with SSSS Gridman in 2018, it was preceded by Gridman Boys Invent Great Hero that was released in 2015. It's a short, so I would recommend throwing that out there to you guys as well too, to watch that. I think it's really cool, just, you know, to get more Gridman. If there's any excuse to get more Gridman, my dude.
It is also from the same director. It's not just from, it's the same director as both Gridman projects. So
and that's like, the thing too. Yeah, you get the continuation of the passion as well. You see the concentrated vision of what the animators adored about the Gridman show, and like because it feels very, you know, proof of concept-y, very much again like how the Little Witch Academia shorts before the series came out were very proof of concept-y, very, you know, here are our characters, you know, they might change, but this at least gives you the template, the format of what we're looking for. And especially with I don't want to say an animation style, but literally the style of animation, really. I think it's something really cool when being combined with tokusatsu and with these types of stories and these plots, because again, I just want to say that at least for myself, I'm not too grossly a fan into tokusatsu. I'd say the most in-depth I've ever gotten into it prior to doing any research for this was in recent times was I watched the Wizard Power Rangers series like 10 years ago, just because I remember everyone talking about how bad and talking mad shit about the Wizard Power Rangers. I was like, fine, let me watch it and just see how bad it is. And it just ended up not being all that bad until like halfway through vampires show up and then they disappear. But so that's another thing too, just kind of with context of our discussion here as well too, is that this is a love letter to a genre, to a style, to a type of storytelling that me personally, I'm familiar with some of the tropes, you know, through cultural osmosis of being on the internet. You know, I've seen more Kamen Rider than I know the name of any of them. No idea. But again, with the SSSS universe, they wanted it to be this gateway series that even if you haven't seen any tokusatsu, the show you were meant to enjoy it without having that background knowledge. And in fact, it was meant to, if you enjoyed it, to inspire you to get into the genre, to look into it, to see what was out there that maybe you might also enjoy. In which, in that case, for at least me personally, it was also very successful. Just because in preparation for our discussion here, for talking about this, I was curious about, you know, with how much quality there was in the show, just on, you know, a metaphorical basis. Like, even while getting none of the references, I loved watching the show and loved everything that it was trying to, like, say and portray. That, you know, that inspired me, that I just had to know, okay, what was this drawing back to?
And I want to preface first off is that because you mentioned how you weren't like super like into knowledgeable in tokusatsu, and I'm even more like I'm coming from the perspective of someone who's even more of kind of a casual tokusatsu fan. It's like, oh, like I watched some Power Rangers as a kid, like when I got up like recently, like between like the past couple years, I've like casually watched episodes of Kamen Rider and like Ultraman and like a little bit of Gridman and a lot of Supaida-man. I really like Supaida-man for obvious reasons, but like
I think that's our favorite. I think that's you correct me.
You gotta love Supaida-man.
We are most familiar with. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's like most of my experience with like that general is it's from the perspective of just campy Japanese schlock of just let's see the dudes in costumes fight monsters. It's like I never really like looked at it. Like I obviously knew that there was more like the wide array of series. There's much more intricate stories and like themes and details about it, but like all the stuff I've seen and just kind of like the way I've consumed it is just in a very popcorn fashion. So it's like I didn't really like I don't know a lot again on a super deeper level. So when I went into Gridman, which I'm just going to refer to this as Gridman just because constantly saying SSSS over and over again is going to be a little tiring. So it's like just when I say Gridman, I'm talking about the anime specifically. It's like so when I went to watch it, I was like, I pretty much didn't, other than like what I knew from Ultraman and Kamen Rider, just the general idea of tokusatsu fighting kaijus. It's like I just kind of knew the general tropes of the genre, which I think like I think knowing the general tropes is enough to just get you into it because like again like he mentioned, the story itself does such a good job of weaving together these like plot beats and just what like the overall like story it's trying to go for, that it's like you really didn't need, like you don't need to like it was something that we kind of realized where it's like everything that you see in the series that you think is like that you think like that's a metaphor for this thing or that relates to this story beat or that story beat is also a reference, is some either obvious or obscure reference to one of the many series. So it's like it functions on so many different like levels that it's like again it's something that for super fans are seeing it and it's like it's a great love letter, and people who just want to see this series with the people who are like tired of Franks and they want a good Trigger series with a robot, you can go into the good Trigger series of robot and then get and then
right
be surprised.
You didn't even have to wait that long in real time. You didn't even have to wait that long. Trigger was like, oh no, we gotta save anime
like
right
honestly
now.
Like I remember like shortly after Gridman came out, I remember seeing a lot of people being like, there was like big conspiracy theories over that Gridman was kind of made because Trigger saw the writing on the wall while they were working on Franks and being all like, this isn't going to turn out good. Let's quickly go and put together like an actual good robot series to come out by the end of the year. Which I think more accurately, it's probably a thing of Franks went down the hill because they left to go put all their effort into Gridman. Which I think we mentioned that in the last episode. That honestly makes the most sense because again, like the end of Franks, they were going full steam.
It's a possibility. It's a theory.
You know, because they were. This is like straight up. We know they were going full on into production in Gridman, and we're starting pre-production in Promare at the same time of the second half of Darling in the Franxx production. So it's like it does seem fairly obvious that like Trigger kind of backed off a bit, but like not in a. I wouldn't
say
where
it starts to get real shaky.
Yeah, which again, and I don't think they left. It's not like they left because it was becoming shaky. It's they left because they focused on other things, and that resulted in it becoming shaky. So I think it is like kind of like a consequence. It's another thing of like Trigger is kind of Franxx is the ending of Franxx is kind of Trigger's fault because again like they kind of it feels like they kind of left it to die rather than jumping ship like a lot of people believe. But it's like it's like they did Gridman, and Gridman turned out super well.
I feel with the genre tokusatsu, like you said, how for the most part, you know, most people's opinion of it is going to be giant rubber suit man fights other man in giant monster rubber suit. But to me, I just on a quick side, I loved just watching this genre in general, just because it kind of reminded me of some of the things I initially got interested in when I first watched anime. Just because you can sort of see the socio-economical background in the style, and I'm not trying to say that like in like a hyper critiquey way, just in the sense that tokusatsu is a genre that is solely based on being able to making the story work on whatever limited budget or limited resources they have to create these shows. Because with going back and doing the research, I watched a couple episodes of the original Gridman the Hyper Agent. So Stefan mentioned that he's just going to refer to as Gridman. So because I now have 2 Gridmen in my brain. Technically, there's 5 Gridmen in my brain, I think. But
2 Gridmen.
All the men's. I'll probably just use 4S or the anime for SS Gridman, which does stand for it is meant to be a reference to when they localized actually the Hyper Agent, the original Hyper Agent, over to Western audiences, similar to Power Rangers, except the Japanese studio was actually still very on hands involved in the localization. So even though they did change the name from Gridman the Hyper Agent, they changed it to Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad. That's where we get the 4 S's. It's also the plot of that stays pretty similar to the original Japanese. It's actually all they really did was make everyone very American-y and then just give them all the same plots. But the anime tries to draw reference to all things Gridman, which I think is super cool. Again, with Trigger's style of writing a love letter, is that it's not just, oh hey, I like this season of this show and just that. Like when Trigger animators love something, they love everything about something, and I love that. So I love how with the anime here, we're not just getting references to the original. You get references to the Western localization. You're going to get your classic Ultraman references as well. And I just thought that whole mixture of all of those references, of reaching out to all of those sources, was such a really cool thing. But yeah, so 4S or the anime is, you got that, and then you have the Hyper Agent that came out in 1993, which I figure we could just talk about a little bit of that real quick, just because it'll really help once we actually discuss Gridman, the show itself. But so it came out in 93, and it was one of the first TV shows that was using basically visual effects, slow-mo, color effects, 3D effects. They were putting graphics on computer screens, which, in 2021, basic shit. There are 13-year-olds on YouTube doing this, out of their basements. But, in 93, on the island of Japan, they were trying to do, technological jumps. It was in line with the plot as well, too. Usually in the Ultraman line, the enemies are aliens, or they're mutants, or the kaijus usually have an external source. They come from somewhere. In Gridman, all of the in the Hyper Agent, all of the kaiju are basically technological. They're in cyberspace, and they fuck with the internet, essentially. So the thing about Hyper Agent is that there's not too many good subtitles out there. They did do a Blu-ray re-release, but I don't has the money for that. So they just call it the computer world. But I'm sure nowadays it's probably more accurately translated to virtual world, or probably the internet. Again, it was 93, so that's actually kind of interesting too, that they were exploring those concepts of the interconnected system of all the world's computers, and how that affects our daily lives as people. For a show to comment on that in 2018 is already pretty Black Mirror-y deep. But the fact that they were trying to talk about that on just a public television show in the 90s for children, I mean, to me alone, that started solidifying more appreciation for the whole Gridman franchise at this point, because it's very much it's like Ultraman, it might as well just be an Ultraman. But I think Gridman has started to solidify itself into its own niche in tokusatsu, that it's not just oh, if you have nothing better to watch Gridman, but no, there are reasons and flows for a Gridman story. And to me, what has been told so far with the few Gridman story that we had has been amazing, and to me, I feel have been actually beautiful stories that can come out of these nerd genres that we have, that come out of mecha fighting, violence-y, explosion-y shows. You know what I'm saying? Out of that whole mass genre of entertainment, the fact that we get stories that are very specifically about helping people And to go back to the four S's, in the anime, they don't still stand for that. They're meant to stand for special signature to save a soul, which, I mean, very much battle to save everyone's soul. I know, like, if even Gridman is ripping off Persona, it can't be helped. But
it also doesn't reveal what those S's stand for until the final episode, which is one of the very smart things, is when they finally show you what those S's stand for, and it's like, I get it.
There you go. But yeah, so you have the original Gridman, the Hyper Agent that came out, and I'm just gonna super quickly like touch on some of the plot points on, just because again these are gonna be the ones that are the most relevant to when we discuss 4S's. So
first, very fast, shouldn't we just quickly just explain like the plot of the anime first? Because then, yeah, because look, from what you told me about Hyper Agent is that there is a lot of similarities. So it's like might as well just quickly explain what the anime is before getting into Hyper Agent.
Yeah, we'll get so let's get into the premise, because premise is gonna give you basically the exact same information here. I'll just give the details on the differences.
Yeah, so once again, the plot of the protagonist of a Trigger series is an amnesiac high school boy. Who would have thought?
God damn it. It's because they keep forgetting.
It's like Trigger can only do two protagonists: very whiny girls or amnesiac, emotionless boys. It's like there are two genders in Trigger.
Well, hey, there was the one time they tried to do an annoying boy, and then they gave him all the girls. I don't know how that happened.
Well, technically, Trigger didn't make that boy, so that doesn't count.
He's not a Trigger boy.
All right, so we got our main boy Yuta Hibiki, who suddenly wakes up and he can't remember anything. He's with a girl in his class named Rika, and he finds his best friend. Utsumi.
He didn't just wake up. He didn't just wake up with any girl. He woke up with the girl. He woke up with the Rika.
The girl. She got them legs that people love. People love them legs.
I'm just letting y'all know, guys. Like, I too am on Team Rika's thighs, but always remember, thick thighs are temporary. Gridman is eternal.
But yeah, so he wakes up and yeah, he's with her. She's basically confused, and it's like it's set up as this thing of like, oh, what's going on? He lost his memory, and also he suddenly starts seeing giant kaiju in the city that nobody else can see for some reason. He talks with his best friend Utsumi, and just suddenly at some point a kaiju shows up and starts destroying the city. And then
his best friend Utsumi is like, wow, super cool. I love those.
And then he, by weird shenanigans, Rika's an old computer in Rika's because her family owns a junk shop. There is a robot named Gridman in there, and he suddenly somehow has a way to connect to it and goes and fuses with Gridman, becoming a giant super robot, and fights and takes down the kaiju. So it's like, and then after that, his two friends can now also see all the random kaiju in the city, which then leads into more and more mysteries as they learn that, so if people die in a kaiju attack, they disappear from the world, and it leads to them trying to uncover this mystery of where the kaiju are coming from, which eventually leads into them discovering that their classmate, Akane, is the one behind it, which then leads into more and more complicated shenanigans as more relationships untangle and more fights ensue, as it becomes a very, honestly, kind of the most surprising Trigger's experience watching, just because, again, I was not expecting how thematically deep the story was going to get. Like, again, I was just assuming that, it is a super fighting robot series that maybe has a lot of relationship drama, but it's like, oh no, it's a story about depression and suicidal thoughts and like your place in life and loneliness and usefulness, and it's just it's to the point that I'm like, wait, this is a Gridman series? Is like, do Ultra and Tokusatsu really go this deep? And from what you've told me about the stuff you looked into, apparently they do.
All the time, yeah. I was shooketh and shocked. Yeah. So yeah, that's basically the premise for 4S. Give or take. To me, I still love how at the end of the first episode, they beat the monster. You're getting to the end of the episode is when they have that first like weird twist moment where they saw the school get blown up, and then the school is rebuilt. And also then, like you said, no one remembers anything about the kaiju attack, which to me is great because that kind of touched into the first real fun point about 4S is that it's almost slightly too aware on the tropes of tokusatsu. So you know how on any other status quo family television, after an episode, everything resets, and we as the audience accept that. The characters in the world accept that, and it's just how the story progresses. So I think it's super cool that what the anime does is that it does these weird contextualizations of tech tropes, like things that are just accepted per genre. The anime tries to either make it an occurrence, like something that is weird to the characters, or is explained in the fact of the show. And that's another thing I really like about what the anime itself actually is, because tokusatsu is held back by the limits of it's a man in a rubber costume. He can only do so much. He can't like take his arm off and throw it at the enemy, or like there's physical limitations to what can be done on top of the financial limitations that they had trying to make these original shows. So to me, what the Gridman universe, what's exciting about it, the potential of it, is that you get the hype, you get the emotion of tokusatsu, but you get the elevation of Trigger Animation being able to make that beam like super flashy and huge, letting Gridman do like a triple backflip and land on one toe because it's animated. We can do whatever the fuck we want. So to me, I think that's also what's so effective at why the anime is an effective love letter as well, is because it not only just does what was so great about tokusatsu, it takes what's great about tokusatsu and elevates it with what's great about anime and animation, and it just makes something even better with the two pieces that got mixed together. So that's something I really like that they do throughout the series, but it's something that I love that the very first episode, like that's kind of the big cap at the end, is where you're like, uh-oh, is this a normal show? No, it's not.
And to bring up the animation, just something I want to bring. I mean, like again, you can say like, oh, the action sequences are great, and it's like, yeah, of course they're great. It's like it's Trigger, and it's like they do it super well, and they blend the CGI excellently. But I want to mention is that directing wise, this is an absolutely beautiful series, and I'm not talking about the action. I'm talking about just the scenery, just the individual shots of just the city, and just you have the giant like kaiju, just the still kaiju far in the background, just like the shots of
in the
fog. You got like the just the general like the city streets, the houses, like every single like you could probably take any single shot in this series and just take it as just a great screen cap, because like everything is framed perfectly. There's all like these little details in terms of, like, where characters are placed. It's like there's like so many like mirror shots, which are like, oh, there's like one character is visible in like one in like a window versus a character in another window, which like obviously symbolizes like separation. You've got like all the like all these great, you've got like the detailed like areas of like people just going to play, like there's like just shots of people in like stores or just like at the bar or like walking around the streets. It's like every like it is like paced like just very like eloquently and perfectly, that which contrasts to the big bombastic like camera swinging like of the actual like the Gridman fights. It feels like the best. It's like the because I'm trying to think of what the closest, because I feel because it's honestly something Trigger has never really done a lot before. Like the closest could be like the small scale stuff in Franks, but even then they didn't go to like this artistic like degree. And like the director Akira Amemiya, before this, like before directing Gridman and that Gridman short, his two biggest claims to fame were co-directing Inferno Cop and directing Ninja Slayer. So it's like going from the
Which is super weird. Like you get the speed in the fights, but like yeah, the actual like scene setting scenes don't give you that vibe. If anything, and I know like I keep bringing this up in our discussion, but it's very Anno Evangelion. Like it's very much like here's a scene of a street sign, here's a scene of the street, here's a scene of power lines. Okay, now we're gonna go into a scene with the characters talking. Like it's that kind of like gritty feel that you get.
Yeah, no, exactly. It is. It is very Anno. It's very Gainax of just like yeah. Here is us just pointing the camera, like pointing the theoretical camera at the world and just pointing for like 2 seconds, then go into the next shot, then go into the next shot. It's just we can keep this for we don't have to keep moving the camera. We can just keep the frame still on this one shot for however long we need to and just let you soak in this environment. Let us see what you can glean from each of these shots and being like, oh, can you notice something about these characters? How are they feeling? What are they doing? It's like it feels like there's because even like the story itself kind of doesn't like it's not like a super deep story. I mean, I would say deep in terms of content.
On the surface,
yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Yeah, like on the surface of what happens in the series, it's very by the numbers, by the book. Okay, this happens, and this happens, and this happens. But like, yeah, it could be that they use that to really dig the layers of just like, yeah, there is so much going on here. Honestly, to the point where I feel like there are so many very deep and intricate and fascinating layers about the story that I think it kind of overloads itself to the point that because it's trying to be a Gridman series and this deep thematic story, but also being just a simple standard like Trigger, like just a general anime, so to speak. And I feel like
in 12 episodes,
yeah, and I feel like that just the fact that it's trying to do that third thing kind of falls flat because it sucks because so much of it is so excellent, and honestly at this point of like what it is probably the second best Trigger project behind Kill la Kill, but there are just like, which we'll get to once we get into more discussion, but there are just these little things that it's like on the one like because you see it from like at least from me, I'm seeing it from two perspectives: the story that the series is trying to tell and like the deep thematic like relevance that you can like read into it. And it's like the reading into it excels so much that it kind of puts down like the content of the series because it's like certain elements of that content kind of is slightly half-assed. Like the main thing is our main three characters, which are kind of they are very just because it's like I mean they are likable and it's like, oh, I like these guys, but it's
no, they're absolutely great,
but it's like in comparison, like honestly, the Frank's characters I thought were much more likable and interesting just because we got much more time. Like it's interesting just because Trigger does normally very huge casts and do a very good job of characterizing their casts very well. Like Kiesniver, for all of its faults and problems, it's like those characters are very memorable and you like a lot of them. But it's like, and then now here we pretty much have just three main characters minus like the other main character and then all the other side characters. But it's like our three mains are just kind of, it's you have again boy, best friend, and girl. And honestly, other than the characters questioning their roles as boy, best friend, and girl, they don't really have much like to do, which again that connects to who this Gridman story really is about.
We'll get there.
Which is like, yeah, because if you look at them from the perspective of what the story is in quotes about, then yeah, them three being kind of blank slates works very well. But when you're looking at it as the content of Gridman, like the series itself, it kind of falls, and because they want to do both, and I think even though because you very well, I mean, you could have like characterized it a bit more and have that second goal still work very well. And it's like, again, I think that is a worthy criticism of being like, you're trying to do both content and theme and one succeeds while one doesn't, and it's like you can have that, but in the end the content still kind of flounders.
Yeah, it happens there. Just kind of when you were talking about like the different sets and just the cinematography as well, one thing I just want to also bring up is that this show also has a variety of like times of day. Like, and I think that helps a lot with a lot of the mood setting as well. Like, we get afternoon, morning, midday, night shots. So just want to also like throw that out there with like you also get dynamic like time of day. Sometimes you get a lot of these animes that for some reason just perpetually take place at 11 a.m. at the same daylight. But I do like how Gridman is always trying to show that like this is a different time, this is a different place. I think like those setting shots help with that as well. But yeah, you have the three main characters. We're introduced them pretty early, and then like you said, like just in terms of their interaction there, it is definitely just in contrast to how Trigger usually, like you said, explores their characters. Because even though we've been referring to it like as a tokusatsu, as a mecha anime, like 4S is more than anything a character study, and it's probably the most character study-y anime that we've looked at so far. That's not to say that the other Trigger shows aren't an exploration into characters, but it's always more of an exploration of, like you said, a cast of characters or the dynamics between characters. Kill la Kill isn't just about Ryoku getting her revenge. We also get invested in her family. We also get invested in Satsuki. We also learn about the Elite Four. Like, you're given the cast, and then it's actually more about how they're all connected to each other. Kiznaiver is specifically about connections and about these characters and how they connect to each other. Little Witch probably, I mean, just in the sense that it's not functioning as a character study. It's not about Akko's character. It's about Akko, but it's not really about like her complexes and her emotions especially since she's probably the most shallow character. Again, believe in self and succeed. Those are two things Akko knows how to do. And then, like you said, with Darling in the Franxx, the main premise of that was specifically to be the dynamic and interactions between a huge cast of characters. So Gridman kind of is a complete flip on that, because we then focus on what is probably the smallest number of characters that a Trigger show has put like intent focus into. I mean, you have like you said, a great cast of characters within this show, but the show itself is not too concerned with them just because they're not important. And that's not even in a opinion sense. It's in the literal sense of the show. There are only certain characters that are important, and the show is willing to focus on them hardcore. So just the whole premise of those characters as well is in and of itself, the first huge big reference of 4S's to the original Hyper Agent show, in that show, you had your three kids. You had Naoto, who's your boy, but he's nice, so that's what's important. So you got your nice boy. Yuka is still your girl, but she's a tech girl. And then I can't pronounce his name, but Ippei. He's meant to be your friend, bro. He's cool too. And they basically build a secondhand computer that they name Junk, and that's when they're contacted by the Hyper Agent. It's basically an internet cop, which, kids, don't talk to an internet cop. Even if he's Gridman, there's no reason to talk to a cop. But, the space cop shows up and is informing them that kaiju have been attacking basically the internet. And so, Hyper Agent has this whole plot set up where anything that's destroyed in the tech world affects real life scenarios. So a monster destroys like the computer system for the water filtration plant, then all of a sudden in the real world the water plant fucks up and everyone has to find clean water elsewhere. And so it does, and then it sets itself up as a monster of the day show in the same way on that premise. And then you even have again the connection where it's kind of funny with Akane how her being responsible for the kaiju attack, blatantly on paper looks like that should be the Trigger twist. Like that should be our episode 9, oh my god, this changes everything about the fights that we've been having. This contextualizes the story completely. On paper, the classmate being the maker of the monster should be that twist, and usually it would be. But with 4S's, that's basically set up and told to you within the first 2 episodes. Like maybe after the first episode you have some doubts, or you're considering that it might be too soon to make those judgment calls. By the second episode, it's like, no, here is the premise. This crazy girl is building monsters and using those monsters to destroy shit. And then from there we get, the nuances, the complexities of that. But even that setup is also just a reference to, in the original show, you have the fourth character, Takeshi, who is basically this elite child. He has wealthy parents who tell him that he has to be perfect and get the best grades, and yet he very, very Diana, but without the psycho aunt. And so he falls into the same situation as Akane, where this intergalactic demon force thingy, in Hyper Agent, he's a Khan Digifer, who basically manipulates Takeshi due to his insecurities, due to his isolation, because he's a lonely guy who has no friends. He's very emotionally unstable, very socially unstable. So he just stays in his room on his computer watching Let's Plays. Not just kidding. Making basically monsters on the internet. And so then what happens is the evil spirit man is like, hey, you make some pretty cool fan art monsters. How'd you like it if I was able to release those onto the internet for everyone to upvote them? And Takeshi thinks that's a great idea, and they team up and they do that. And so that was kind of one of those things where, like, I was very shocked that something that I thought was a very unique thing to 4S's and to the show was something that's just deeply ingrained into the franchise of Gridman. So to me, like, I that helped me actually appreciate, like I said, the whole franchise as a whole, that it wasn't just like a fluke story. That no, this tends to be the theme whenever they use Gridman, as opposed to, throwing Ultraman into the fray again. Is that they tend to be stories either with a connectivity to technology, connections themselves, because let's be honest, they're using the internet also in and of itself as its own message. Like, the internet is our modern day means of connecting, of organizing, of literally sometimes just like actually getting things done. And so again, for it to be it's really interesting that a show in the early 90s was willing to like look at it and discuss computers and like how we interact with them and how that was an effect on human connections. So you have that whole hardcore setup in both the original Hyper Agent show and into the anime. The thing that is a little bit different, though, is that with the anime being 12 episodes long, I think it functions really great as a greatest hits version, because the one thing that's a little iffy about the original Hyper Agent show is that it is 39 episodes of a tokusatsu show. So about 15 of those episodes, shit happens, but it all just gets reset back to the status quo, and you're just going to end up back in the same episode. So with the anime, I really like how it wastes no time. Like, we are getting into like Madoka levels of concise storytelling, where each episode is meant to serve a specific function. Like, you have your first 3 episodes introducing the Gridman Alliance, introducing Akane, and into the kaiju, and to kind of what sets up the kaiju attacks. And then in the anime, you learn that there's very specific situations where Akane is either wronged or is inconvenienced, or basically anytime other humans exert their existence around her seems to set her off. And rather than deal with it with communication, or literally, like, she could probably punch another student in the face and it would probably be less destructive than what she chooses to do. Instead, because she is just a huge tokusatsu fan herself, a huge kaiju fan herself, she decides, fuck it, I'm gonna take some modeling glue, take some wire, I'm gonna make the best damn kaiju ever, and I'm just gonna have it blow up and kill whoever I don't like. Which is intense. It's very intense. And I think it's a really cool take on a villain, period. Like, again, we're coming from a show that decided that it really wanted to hard turn towards space aliens that want us to get rid of our bodies, and immediately turn to something a lot more I don't know, not even realistic, just believable. Like, I can full on believe an antisocial, bullied child going on a murderous rampage because they were given the ability to create like giant monsters. Like, yeah, no, absolutely.
See, that's where kind of my half issue, one of my half, well, I would say, because there are a couple, like, yeah, like the actual issues, like with the way the characters are, with how the characters are developed, but my kind of half issue is that Trigger, once, not as bad as Frank's, but once again kind of leans into the whole, oh, the human can't actually be the bad guy, it's the alien that shows. Like, the difference is Alexis is there from the literal beginning, so it isn't an ass pull. It's like he's there from the beginning, and he's introduced, you know what his deal is, so you're like, okay, you know where this is going, and it makes sense. It's just kind of, again, like, once we get to the, yeah, because again, like, Akane is introduced as, like, yeah, this really interesting, fascinating villain of, like, oh yeah, she just kills, she creates a giant monster to just destroy everything and kill whoever inconvenienced, like it's never people with malicious intent. Like, the first thing we see her is that one of her classmates accidentally hits a sandwich that she was trying to give to Hibiki, and like, and it's not in a like a teenage, like, malicious, haha, you shouldn't have gotten away. It was a, oh crap, I'm so sorry, is there anything I can do? And she's like, nah, that's fine, don't worry about it, and then proceeds to make the monster to kill them. So it's, and then, like, yeah, there's like a teacher accidentally, like, runs into her
and then proceeds to murder.
And just because the teacher didn't say sorry, she's like, well, fine, I'm gonna kill him then. And then it's like, so you basically have just all of the, like, little, like, you have these inconveniences, and it's like, for which at the beginning she's like introduces just, yeah, this basically a petty brat, effectively, of just, oh, it's just whatever I want because I think kaiju are fun and I just want to see destruction and get these people out of my system. And then it kind of gets more and more, like, twisted and complex, as, like, again, like, you said you thought that the big twist was gonna be, oh, that she created the monsters, but then the big twist ends up being that, oh, Akane is the god of the world, and then you just kind of go, wait, what? And then, like, that one like reveal basically turns Akane, like, on its head of just like now it becomes like Akane isn't just, I mean,
she goes from villain to main character, and literally the only character in the entire show.
Which is where the issue between content and themes kind of persist for me, because it's like, when you're looking at the story from the lens of Akane, and this is Akane's story, and that this is that it's essentially just a giant symbolic thing of her retreating into her own self-depression and needing to basically save so that she can come out and, like, stop, basically, like, everybody in this world is just an extension of herself, and that everybody she's hurting in the world is hurting herself. And it's like so, like, anytime she kills someone, it's like you can read that from the perspective of, oh, she's just killing a part of herself. And it's like there are scenes when she's, like, thinking on back to all those people she's killed, and it's like weighing in our mind. So it's all of this basically self-harm and self-affliction, and it's just it's that very kind of, like, the powerful hit stuff, which is she always wants to just lock herself in her room, which is just filled with endless amounts of trash bags. And it's like, oh, you just from those shots you understand, okay,
I was gonna say, when people say that this is not a show about depression, if you see her bedroom, like, let me tell you, I've seen depression. I know what it looks like. It looks like a room full of trash bags that you just don't want to take out.
Yeah, so when you look at it from this perspective of basically Akane's inner self coming out to basically save Akane from herself, that becomes, like, a very powerful and moving, like a genuinely moving, like, story to follow, and, like, just seeing, like, wanting her to basically wake up, which, yeah, by the end it's like, oh, the whole thing is about getting her to wake up. The issue for me is that,
wake up, Leela, wake up.
The issue for me is that this series is this series doesn't just exist in Akane's head. It is a world in and of itself that expands to not only the Gridman franchise, but also has sequels. So it's like, in this context, these characters don't just exist just because of Akane. They exist on their own, which then makes Akane not less interesting, but less likable to me, just because on the basis of, oh yeah, it not only makes her less likable, but it also is like, oh, these characters need to be also stand on their own, so when they don't stand on their own as characters, beyond their connection to Akane, it kind of like, it falls flat. It's like the main three and their connection, and their connection to Akane, it works very well, but then when it's like, oh, when you put them on their own, they don't really hold up as well, and the story wants to do both, and I just don't think it handles it that well. Especially because, again, like, when you have it, like, with the context of Alexis as the villain of Akane's story, and it's like, that fits very well, of just you can just see it as this virus that's eating her up inside, and it's like, it's the manifestation of all of her basically all of her indulgences. But when you look at it as just, it's another alien virus that showed up and basically took advantage of a depressed girl to commit crimes, and then in the end it's like, oh, the committed crimes isn't their fault because the big alien was taking advantage of her. It's like, she didn't know any better, and it's like, it doesn't ruin it for me, but I'm like, you were so close to making like an actual interesting villain, but it's like, you couldn't make him a villain. Especially because, again, like, Alexis, I mean, I'm about to say he has a cool design, but it's just Inferno Cop level 3. It's just Inferno Cop evolved into Overjustice, which evolves into Alexis.
Again.
It's like, it looks cool, and I love his English dub voice actor. It's like, he has a very nice, like, calming, like, baritone, and like, he's very proper. And I literally just found this out, like, before we started recording, is that what's his name? The guy, let me, I just want to quickly double check, the English for the Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad, like the American version of Hyper Agent, the Alexis character, Kilokon, in that series was voiced by Tim Curry. And when that went,
yes,
that makes so much sense, because the Barry Indle is definitely doing a Tim Curry impression when he's voicing Alexis. So I'm like, yeah, that put it all together. No wonder I thought that voice. But it's like, yeah, again, other than his look and his performance, I thought he's just a very bare bones character. Again, just alien space virus alien that wants to consume people, and that's it. So it's like, again, it's the life fibers with a face. It's like, it's better than Papa, but it's like, again, it's Trigger and the VAs basically saving something that it's like, man, it's like wouldn't it have been like, if it was just Akane? It just makes me think of, like, what if this was just Akane, and like just Akane dealing with her own shit, and like Alexis was just a side thing beyond just, it's again, I have no, this might be just my whole thing of just my super hyper fixation with villains. Like, I want villains to be complex, but I don't want villains to just only be victims and not villains. It's like, victims can be villains too. It's like, let them be bad. That's my big picket fence. Let them be bad.
And they should, yeah. Especially since, we're starting to see this pattern that, I mean, I get it. I guess I see it as a way to, humanize or make them relatable. I mean, Hyper Agent, again, does the same thing with Takeshi, by not really forgiving him, but like by the end of the show you understand him. There's several episodes that focus on him. It's not to the extent of 4S's where that is the Akane story about Akane and her problems. Hyper Agent, it is also about the Gridman Alliance in that show as well too. Their characters in that are a little basic, just because 90s television for children. They're not going to go too hammy on it, other than the very forgivable villain in that. But with 4S's, it is kind of cool how you get that introduction, you get the premise, you even get a couple kaiju battles, and I do love how in the kaiju designs, how in 4S's they're all explicitly designed that they look like a person in a costume. Like, even with the unlimited potential of animation, they still decided that in terms of the genre, they kept all the kaiju designs in a way to where, you can see where the strings would go. You would see where the man in the costume would fit in. And to me, I think it's fantastic. It kind of just ties into the whole, like, we're just going to explain the genre. We're just going to, if it's in the show, it's going in the anime. And I heckin' love that.
The kaijus are super, super cool. Yeah, they all have such cool designs, and it's like, and they're all like unique, especially because when they end up reappearing later and showing off, and it's like, oh yeah, you can recognize, oh, is that guy from that episode and that guy from that episode.
Yeah, and that's tokusatsu. Like, literally, that was kind of in the research there, is that usually tokusatsu kaijus, when they come back as a mecha version. The only exception is, I'm gonna butcher this name, but Anolius, I guess, who does show up in 4S's at the very, very, very end. But Anolius, I guess, is one monster that they brought it back, but they brought it back as an imposter. And then what had happened was, in Hyper Agent, Anolius is a kaiju that's not initially bad, but instead gets basically brainwashed by Takeshi and Condigifer. They basically use music to, like, brainwash it. And so Gridman, instead of like, oh, I'm gonna kill the monster, instead, like, releases the kaiju, and instead just kind of sees that the kaiju's not bad in nature, is just being controlled. And so in that episode, Gridman does this whole thing where he saves the kaiju, he fixes everything. The fixer beam is very important. That was kind of the one thing I also, like, picked up by watching Hyper Agent, is that's kind of the way that they do the world resetting. Is Gridman has he's a healer class. He can literally repair the damage that was done, and that's his true powers, is not only being able to take out the monster, but also then being able to, fix the damage that the monster had done. So Gridman has this episode with this kaiju that he helps instead of destroys. And so, in reference, the anime, halfway through the show, or like in the first third, so we already are well aware that Akane is responsible for the kaiju, but we're not really sure, like, on full motivation other than being a brat. And that's when we're introduced to, again, I'm gonna ruin the name, Anolius II. And that's the little girl that, she looks suspiciously like Froppy. Is that just me? Like, as someone who has watched the Hero show, am I wrong?
Which one? Oh, the oh yeah, she the thing is, she does kind of look like Froppy, and it's even more so because in the English dub she's voiced by Monica Rial, who also voiced Froppy. So that also literally helped. Yeah, it's the same. Okay. So that was like, yeah, because I saw, I didn't think of Froppy, but she definitely has those big eyes. She's got those big eyes and like that very kind of like smiley face.
Yeah, and so in a reference to that episode, which, get used to us saying in reference to one specific episode to Gridman, because the Gridman universe is about to go ham on doing references to one specific episode. But in reference to, that kaiju being spared, they introduce this character who basically contacts Yuta and is like, hey, here's the nature of the world. And so that's how we get, again, what also probably feels like it could have been like an episode 10, like, trigger twist, is, the fact that it's a self-contained virtual world, kind of, but a mental world within Akane. And like you said, by that logic, then all characters within the show, within the anime, are just factions, or are just concepts of Akane's personality. And that was one interesting thing, too, looking back, by seeing the original context of that in Hyper Agent, is that you kind of do start to see a bit more into the trio. You start to see, like you said, this is also a show about purpose. With the trio, midway through the show, into the second half of the show, they do start to think of themselves like in those team dynamics. Your main character, Hibiki, he's default essential. Like, he turns into Gridman He is the grid man. He has to be on the team, regardless. Meanwhile, Rika, from the get-go at the beginning of the show, has zero interest in actually fighting the kaiju. She's not interested in the mystery of it. She doesn't want to fight Akane over it. Her big issue at the beginning was when, her friends were killed in the first episode and that no one remembered. And the fact that she felt that emptiness and that hole of, these people were here, now these people are gone and no one remembers. Like, it's a whole Final Fantasy type Zero horror situation that I love, but it motivates her. But then she starts going through these things where it's like, well, do we need to fight? Which I think is a very clever thing that they did with her character. And it's always, to me, is always a very clever thing in any sort of genre where the default is, fighting violence. I'm not like trying to do it in like a hyper pacifist way, but just it's always interesting to like even consider that option in genres where like violence and the combat are so ingrained into the genre that's like to even consider a non-violent option within the show is like whoa, are you going off the script? But that leads into more deeper things when we start to get into who the characters actually truly are. But I think it is really interesting what they do with Rika early on, with her being this character who questions whether even fighting with the Gridman is the right answer at all. Like, because that is something that is kind of interesting in tokusatsu. It's like you have these shows that go on for 30 fights and none of the characters at any point are like, wait, should we try something different? Should we like not do it the same way we've done it the last 30 episodes way? But they try to touch on that. And then you have Utsumi, who, kind of like how I said that 4S's is like the best hits of Gridman is in Trigger fashion. We do have our Elite Four special character team, but in Gridman, they are friends, they are allies, they are junior high schoolers. Miss me with that. Not a single one of them looks like they're in junior high. But you have
they are also literally the Elite Four. We have the big guy, we have the tomboy, we have the aloof samurai, and we have the quiet techie. It's like they are just the Elite Four, and when I saw them show up, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And it's annoying because they have cool designs but it's like they pretty much have just no character. They're literally just there just so Gridman can fuse with them and get more powers.
Well, you'll be shocked to know that they have more personality than they've ever had because so they're called the Neon Genesis Junior High students, which
reference
I like. One, a reference, and two, I like Trigger's new thing of, you know what, let's just make a team name of English words that sound like they mean nothing, but, over here in the States, we're like, wait a minute, those are our words. We know what those mean. But, they're in total reference to in the fact that in Hyper Agent, so you had the team of three. You have Naoto, who can turn into the Gridman. You have Yuka, who's your girl programmer. She can communicate with Gridman. But Ippei, and actually both of the two characters that stay behind with Junks during the fight, throughout the story, they basically have programming skills in the same way that Takeshi makes the kaijus in his computer program. The kids throughout the series actually make the upgrades and the weapons for Gridman. So I think it's kind of interesting how in 4S's they were like, well, what if the weapons were characters? So to me, even though there is not a lot of character, there is actually a character now. Because in the original, they were just straight up computer programs that were typed in and sent to Gridman so that he could combine and get powered up. But I think they're all really cool. I do like how for a couple episodes, it's literally new friend, new power up, beat the kaiju, episode end. Next episode, new friend, new power up, beat the kaiju, next episode. And you get that for all four members of the junior high school brigade until you get to again the Anolis twist where it's oh no, Akane is now going ham after you guys.
It's been a while since I watched the whole thing, but wasn't it just Samurai Dude, the Samurai Dude was introduced first, and then the other three all came in together. Like, I don't remember it being like one episode another person was introduced. I think it was, yes, it was Caliber came up, and then the three of them showed up later, and it's like, okay, now it's all four of us. But yeah, because it was like the first time the three other guys show up, they're like, oh, how about all four of us combined? And they're like, oh no, Junk can't handle all four of us together, so we got to go one or two at a time.
Yeah, no, that's what it was. It was where it's basically the power ups that are introduced one at a time, but the human counterparts are all introduced together as a team.
Yeah,
I like their designs. They're cute and cool. Plot wise, not really needed. Again, they're just there to be the weapons that never had personalities in the first place. But I think it's kind of cool, just like in the opening, how they're standing very much like, you know, the bad guys. Like, they give me the same vibes that the bad guys for Supernatural Battle in the opening gave me, where it's like, oh man, these are the dudes we're gonna have to punch in the face. It's like, oh no, these are just the friends.
They're there basically to be like the ones who know what's going on for the kids to talk to. And it's like
even though they don't know what's going on, because everyone's got amnesia, and technically, it's the other, because there's two characters. There's Akane and another character, and that other character also has amnesia.
And it's like, yeah, yeah, it's just, yeah, but again, because it's like, I mean, the whole idea is like, oh, it's like, because the whole thing is Akane's world, so Akane is. She's like basically manipulating and controlling aspects of it. It's like, it's kind of like a thing of like, yo, like she has some semblance of it, it's kind of like in a weird in like a good confusion of like, you kind of don't know how much control she has of like, it's like, does she have literal control of everything and she just decides to only do some things, or is it she's actually only control of like certain aspects and she's only limited in what she can and can't do, and it's all about like, yeah, so you don't know if it's just, oh, it's her just going easy, or if it's her like only doing what she can do. And it's like, yeah, that you don't know. And I think I think that's the smart thing of like being like, oh, you're not sure.
They keep it ambiguous. Well, especially since this is a story on like, not to use the big words, but like, this is a story on mental health. So I feel like to set very clear like guidelines, like, oh, Akane could have done this, she can do this. I feel like it's very defeatist in a story about this topic, where, you know, you don't know the strength of people's personal struggles. Personal struggles have huge power and can be incredibly overwhelming. So to me, I think it was very good how they kept it as a very vague, she is the god of the world. And that's it. Like, either that provides her already the power, it provides her the position without going deeply into, can she just like snap someone out of existence without a kaiju, or is the kaiju the only means? Does she control just the city? Can she control it? Like I said, it's very good that they keep it ambiguous, because that way they at least, you know, Akane has the power, but you're not sure, like, she's not in full control. It's not like it's a really interesting thing that they do with that.
Especially because as her depression gets worse, the more the world starts to open up and you see just the digital, like the Digimon digital mind space that exists like above the city, where it's like, oh, the world
literally in the sky.
Yeah, it's like so now you're like, so is the entire world a computer program? Maybe, I don't know.
Could,
I don't know.
Could be. Yeah, because you have because you have the intro kaiju, and then you get the twist there, and then even before the big city, because then Akane makes anti.
Yep. Okay. All right. Here it is. This is where I got to go into like the true, actual best character in the story, and honestly, my second favorite Trigger character. Period. But behind Mako is fucking love Ant. Like, this is how you do a villain redemption arc. This guy is like, he is like everything that I love in like these type of characters. It's like just from how he's introduced, like just that whole first episode of showing what this character's like. It's such like a cool like concept of like, oh, like you're introducing the rival character, like the character who's only it's like the only character. I mean, he's literally created by Akane, whose only purpose is to fight Gridman. So it's like this thing of like, oh, I want to fight Gridman, and every time he shows up, I want to fight him. But it's like he is so like programmed to fight Gridman that anytime she asks him to do literally anything else, he's like, I can't. I can only fight Gridman. And she's like, you're fucking useless. Get out of here. And I'm like, bitch, you created him. What are you doing? And it's like, that's why I can't like get on Akane's side so much, because she is so terrible to Auntie when, again, he's like the one where most of his bad stuff is honestly not his fault. And again, he doesn't even do that many bad stuff.
What if I told you that's Akane's, interactions with every character? It's like, they're only that way because you made them that way, girl.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, yeah, and it's such a fun thing of seeing how that relationship develops, of just he's just so upset. You have those like the little moments of him like just scrounging for food because he's still technically a person, and he's like, I need food to survive. But she doesn't think about that because she doesn't see, I mean, she especially doesn't see him as a person, because it's like, oh, you're a kaiju, you're even less than the people living in this world. And it's like Rika, who's like the one, and then later the Neon Genesis junior school, where they're like taking care of him and like giving him food and like even a little bit of shelter, just because they're like, oh, because we want to help. And it's like, you look like you needed saving. And it's then you see like how it goes more and more. If he's just like, I want to fight Gridman. It's like Gridman isn't showing up, and he's like, I want to fight Gridman. Where is he? He's like, oh, if you beat this kaiju, then Gridman will show up. So he's like, okay. Then he beats the kaiju, and then Gridman does show up, but then he immediately depowers. And it's like, and then that leads into again the whole thing of like, oh, Gridman's not going to fight you because you're a person, and he's not going to fight a person. And then that leads to his existential crisis, until it gets to the big thing of like, fine, if I can't fight or beat Gridman, I will become Gridman. And then it's like, the one thing of like, his literally name is Anti. He should be the anti-Gridman, but it's like, no, he becomes the Grid Knight. And I'm like, okay, Grid Knight is cool, but it's like, he's the anti-Gridman. And it's just like, yeah, seeing him become like the next, like that hero, and just turning himself into like the new Gridman, it's just so cool, and it's so fun really seeing cool. It. It's like, and I think his dub performance by Stephen Mew, I think Stephen Few is very well done. He fits. He's annoying. He's a good like branch of annoying. Like, it's like he has that very whiny like voice, but it never goes into screeching territory. It's like, oh, it's like he's funny to listen to whenever he's like just doing his like shouting for Gridman.
Right. I do love his whole character trait of just always hungry. I always kind of like thought, like, is it because he has the appetite of a kaiju just all the time or something? Right? Or they probably just meant it to be literally just a quirky trait of he's not used to having a stomach, and so he just wants to eat all the time. It is funny because that continues on into.
I also saw it as a thing of like, also just saw it as a thing of like, oh, he did like he goes days without eating because Akane / nobody, like, I always saw it as just like, because like every time we see him, it's like several days pass, and it's like, oh, he's starving because she hasn't fed him. Because it's like, it's clear she probably hasn't actually fed him since like the one time we see her feed him. She probably hasn't fed herself. And in fact, I think I saw a thing where it was like, there's references to the fact that because she is the only human in the show, she's the only one that doesn't sleep. There is a specific episode like that's about dreams. Also a Hyper Agent reference. Like, I just need to put an asterisk at the end of every one of my sentences, just because. It, like we said, everything that we thought was just a nice, good, solid metaphor just also ended up doubling up as, oh, it's also just a reference from Hyper Agent. Oh, it's something related to Auntie that I love, like, regarding to Alexis, is like, I love Alexis's, like, very obvious gaslighting toward, Akane. With them. With the whole thing of, like, he's like, oh, Akane isn't making, like, new kaijus because she wants to deal with, Hibiki and all that stuff, so he's like, oh, this is boring, oh, Auntie, you want to do stuff, here, I'll let you make a kaiju, and then Auntie makes a kaiju, and she's like, what the fuck, and he's like, oh, you were off doing your own thing. I gave it to him because he seems much more interesting. And then it fails, and then he's like, oh yeah, of course he was going to be terrible. You are my prime student. I'm going to follow you. You do whatever you want. It's like, yeah, it's that clear manipulation of just like throw you to the side, and then when the Auntie's thing fails, and he's like, oh, I'm just back to you. That was just a test. It's okay. You're clearly better. And it's like, yeah, like that's like the good kind of like, yeah, that's like probably like his best thing of like, oh yeah, just that pure like snively manipulation is just like, oh, that's so great.
Well, yeah, and because it plays very specifically on what are Akane's insecurities, on those fears of just being left behind by who she sees as like the one person that like is caring and connecting and relating to her, is the creepy fire ghost in her computer. But again, don't talk to cops on your computer. If they're Inferno cops in your computer, or if they're cyber cops, don't talk to the cops in your computers.
And it's even more, and I think what's really like, I think again like what's good ambiguity is that you don't know like what happened. Like there's never like a thing of like, oh, what happened to Akane that led like what was there something that happened like at her school, or like did something happen in her life or with her family or anything. Like they don't say, and like you have no idea what. It's just she's dealing with some shit, and it's like that's all you need to know. It's like you see like it could be something incredibly minor. It's just, oh, she has like nothing bad could probably, like, it's very possible nothing bad ever actually happened to her. She just has extreme self-doubt, and it's like that alone is still just as valid as, oh, all her family died, or people are bullying her at school. It's like anything, like no matter how big or small, it's like all it is that she's dealing with some shit, and it's like this is her very extreme coping mechanism that's way too toxic and needs to be put down somehow.
That she needs to be rescued from, I'd say.
Which is and that leads into again the my what I think this is like my main big issue is the relationship between Akane and the main three, because like that is the big thing that leads to the ending is, oh, that Akane needs to be saved by the main three, and it's like it's them kind of acknowledging, like it probably, like, I think like the coolest, like the biggest like oh shit moment for me was when like after Rika like finds out the truth about Akane, and there's like that scene in the bus when like she's talking, she's like trying to figure out what Akane wants and what she's doing, and Akane has that thing of like, oh yeah, I'm a god and I created all this, I created you, and I created everyone, I created you to be my friend, and it's like no matter what, I love
that when she's like, I made you specifically to love me, like all of these positive helpful emotions that you're directing towards me, yeah, I made you feel those. It's like, girl.
And she says, no matter what terrible things I do, you'll never be able to hate me. And I'm like, oh shit, that is like, it's such kind of like a smart thing of like being like how they can be like, they can never truly hate Akane no matter what terrible shit she does, which like, again, like when you lead into the dream episode, when she traps them in the memories and tries to be friendly with them, and then they break out. And it's like, even despite like what they did, what she did to her, they're still like, oh, we can't seem to like to fully hate her. And it's like, I thought that was a very interesting twist that they did, but then it just kind of leads into a, oh no, we're still going to save her because we're her friend, and it's like it's kind of there needed to be more, because all three of them pretty much only have one scene of them together before they know that Akane is the one like responsible. Like if there was 2 or 3 more scenes of like Akane with Rika and Akane with Hibiki and Akane with Utsumi of just being friendly, and it just, no matter if it was her like for if there was ulterior motives or just her being friendly before she learned the truth. It's just, if there was more scenes of her being friends with them, I feel like I would have bought like them considering her a friend. Like it's the whole Noriko and Kisniver problem, is that there isn't enough that the series does to make me believe that these characters would like her or like would want to consider her a friend. And it's like yeah, again, which I think it's the difference between like that's why I think the difference is between wanting to save her and considering like her as a friend. What I stand by, like there, you could have like done the whole thing of we want to save her despite what she's done, rather than we want to save her because she's our friend. Because again, like I don't feel that was earned. It's like I don't think they did enough in the story to make me believe that, oh yeah, these three were friends before shit went down, and they want to kind of reclaim that friendship. It's again, especially in regards to Rika and Akane, because again, there is just, for how much people love that relationship, there is just not that much. Like that was the biggest disappointment for me, because I was like, oh, everybody was like, oh, the Gridman is super super gay, and I'm like, oh yes, and then I get in and I'm like, not really. Like,
I mean, girls are holding hands. That's cool. Friends do that. right?
It's like yeah,
No,
yeah, because and yeah, the econ, yeah, because I was like, I said this to you, but it's like Gridman's biggest target demographic on Twitter is depressed lesbians, and like they especially love Akane and Rika. So I was like, like my biggest my biggest exposure to Gridman was Akane and Rika, and just seeing all the images of them, the fan art of them together. So I'm like, oh, I guess the series is like what I was expecting was that the series was supposed to set up that that it's that you think that it's gonna be Hibiki is gonna break Akane out of it, but then it actually turns out to be Rika who's like the true love of her life, and it's like that kind of happens, but it's also like it didn't feel as earned, because again, like you only get one true like genuine moment of like before, like other than like the ending, you only get one true genuine moment of them being friendly with each other, and that's like the scene with them on the bus, with them at the bus stop together. And it's
and the thing about that bus scene is that I would classify that as one of the fights, because again, it's one thing that I really liked about when you look at Rika's character, like on the just the 4S level character level, that she's this character who's looking for the non-violent, the way to resolve this by just reaching out, the lesson of the show, and having that unfortunately not succeed the first time, because that's the thing, is that she does end up succeeding. It just takes her having to have a couple conversations before it eventually all works out.
Well, I was referring to the scene before, like the bus stops, like not the scene on the bus stop scene, which like them being friendly, and then there's there's the next scene that's on the bus of them just be like before she finds out the truth, of them just being friendly, and it's like that's pretty much the only, like, because then after that is when they find out the truth, and then that's when then she talks with her of like trying to figure out what her deal is, like you said, and it's like I wanted to see more of just like them being friends, and like just getting them to be like, oh yeah, these people were friends, then shit went bad and they want to become friends again, rather than just these guys are like these two know each other and then shit goes bad and then now she considers her a friend, especially because like literally like Akane shows up, stabs Hibiki with a box cutter, and then she's like I'm gonna go find Akane, I can't forgive her for what she's done. 5 minutes later, it's okay, Kane. Nothing bad happened. It's all right. It's like it's just a weird. It's such a weird whiplash. It's such a weird whiplash of like either don't have her say that, or like have her like actually confront her in some way. And again, it's like if there was more scenes of Akane and Rika being like genuine friends and like seeing them as genuine friends, I think I would have bought like them together like much, like her like.
Well, it's interesting because even at the very beginning of the show, Rika mentions that she hasn't been, that she knows Akane, that like they're in class and that I think she may even mention that they're friends, but she doesn't say that like they've hung out. They're not like the bestest of friends until like the plot starts rolling, and then it's like, oh no, we're the bestest of friends, because she was more concerned with the other girls. She was more concerned with the other classmates that had died and just never came back, and that was kind of what scooped her up into the whole adventure, versus like initially it being, the strong connection with Akane, because it's really, like you said, it's not there in the beginning. It's really not. It's only once, Rika and Akane are main characters of the show that like, okay, now we gotta worry a lot about what their connection is, what their values are towards each other. And I agree with you that it would be more effective, at least for the solo anime, to have included more scenes of maybe the characters interacting with Akane, just even though it would have just ended up being like the facade of who she is. But I feel like this is also another thing where watching the Hyper Agent kind of adds into that context of the show as well too. Just because in Hyper Agent, you have the 3 kids, and basically all of these kids are super friendly. Like they are the nicest kids ever. That even in the original show, when they find out that Takeshi is the one who made the kaiju and has been making all the kaijus that they've been fighting for the whole series, their response is literally like, hey, come to our secret base, we need you to help us out. So that's also kind of in the Gridman franchise-ness, that just your main characters, that's sort of their power, is their ability to just forgive it, is to just this is our mission. We got to save you. You may be a brat and you may be hurting us emotionally and stuff, but the mission is to help you out. So we're gonna reach out. I don't know if it's going hardcore full forgiveness. In the case of 4S's, they have no choice. They have to. But it's definitely in line with what they're trying to reference to. And so again, I think it's also like you said, it's an issue of having the cake and eating it too. It's having the reference, but also shoving the reference into a plot that it fits, but it's a little off. There's some wiggle room. It's not nearly as tight a fit as it was in the original plot, and even in the original plot, it's a little iffy and sketchy too. But
and based on what you've said about Takeshi, it's like Takeshi's making like kaiju, but like but based on what you told, like based on what you've told me about the plot, is like, oh, he's creating like kaiju like like he's not like intentionally sending kaiju out to destroy the city for petty reasons. He's making kaiju, and then random computer virus is sending the kaiju into the digital verse, and it's like so his kaiju are fucking up like computers, but again, it's like he's not like creating kaiju to destroy and rewarp reality just because they're bored. And it's like I think
his
it's
issues are more just that he has no control, and so he is malicious in the show too. It's not like he just made the kaiju and like it's in his sketchbook, but like he makes them for the intent of like, oh no, this monster would be awesome for messing with the traffic lights or the train controls. Like he does it for those negative intents. But again, it's very much because Condigifer is like, hey, make me a kaiju. Very, very exactly like how Alexis is like, hey, make me a kaiju. But I do love the difference in that Takeshi makes his kaijus like in a program. Like he literally makes his kaiju like in Photoshop, versus Akane makes hers like with raw wire and clay and the box cutter, which the box cutter is also a fucking reference. It's not just, you know, a self-harm imagery. It's full blown also a cyber agent reference.
And to go back to something slightly regarding like the relationship with the characters, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but in Persona 5, the whole thing is like, I mean, the whole thing like with Royal and like Akechi is like people like Akechi more because of his added social link with Joker, and it's like you get to see more of them two like being quote unquote friends, even if he is being like facetious in the background the entire time. You can more easily in Royal, you can more easily buy that he would want to consider them as friends because he believed that friendship was real for like longer compared to original Persona 5, where there really wasn't that much genuine friendly connection between them. So it makes it feel less hollow. Like it makes that relationship by the end of it feel more hollow in comparison, which is like, I think like that's like a good like connection with Akane, where it's like if Akane had more genuine, like to the characters, genuine connections, it would feel like you would buy that, oh, they would consider her friends and want to help even despite all the bad stuff, versus again like just the one connection, the one scene each that they all had with her, and then they're like, oh, we're friends, we're gonna help her. It's like, again, like I think there should have been like I feel like again you could have had it if there was just a bit more. Like I needed more of that context,
or at least more explicit. At least probably something that more solidified what they were and what their purposes were. Just because, you know, as part of the research, I was looking into all the stuff for the show. I was checking out YouTube videos as well on Gridman, and I found one on shout outs to Craft Dwarf. His video is really interesting because he started it by mentioning that a lot of the videos that were online for Gridman, a lot of them were released around the time that the show was actually released, and then a lot of them were from people who had a background of, I watched Gridman, but I didn't watch like the original. Like I didn't go back, or they didn't have the context of Hyper Agent. And so, you know, doing his due diligence and making a fantastic video, he pointed out and explored a lot of the connections between like the plots and themings of Cyber Agent into 4S's. But one thing he brings up the roles and the purposes of the trio as well. how I talked about earlier, how Rika is meant to be this character who, looks at these very genre heavy situations and is like, but can we do something else? You have Utsumi, who in Cyber Agent, again, it's the other two kids who make the upgrades. They're able to send the upgrades to Gridman. They usually give him, like the pointers in battle, telling him to like dodge or whatever. With 4S's, because the upgrades are given characters instead, it sort of takes away from what Utsumi would be set up to be. He would normally be, the third kid who makes the power-ups, knows programming, and can send Gridman his power-ups because the power-ups are already people. Utsumi, oddly enough, is given less of a role, but it's really neat because then that opens him up to be this character where he has a couple moments where he is like full-on questioning, why am I even here? Like, why do we have 3 people on this team when one person's doing all the work, one person is kind of doesn't even want to be involved, and I'm just sort of here because I love giant robots, which, fair and valid, my dude. Like, if you're in a situation just because you love yourself a good giant robot, you stay there. Like, you stay there till the very bitter end. But another thing that I hadn't like thought of or really looked into is the role that those characters serve within Akane. Not just in the team of the Gridman Alliance. And I feel like that kind of helps at least give some credence to like why would they want to save Akane. Not only in the whole, they have no choice, existential dread, blah, blah, blah. But there's the sense that each of these characters, even though they are not Akane, are Akane. They are aspects of her. The actual pink hair character Akane is meant to be actually an idealized version of the main character. It's not how she actually looks. It's not how she actually acts. Instead, this is what she would love and would want to look and act like. Questionable as it may be and as bratty as it may be, that's what that character in the world of the Gridman anime is. She is just this idolized version of the main character and who she wants to be. And then the main 3 are other separate aspects of her. Utsumi being, her tokusatsu obsessed parts of her personality, the parts that, memorize every single kaiju, memorize every single Ultraman, but that she hides away, that she doesn't engage and show off in all the scenes where they're just in the classroom and like Akane is not, a god of terror. She's not really engaging in Utsumi on those levels of like, hey, did you see last night's Ultraman? Yeah, dude, it was real great. Like, it's not until you get to that dream moment and where they even mention that like, damn, we could have had this. We could have had Akane could have had this connection with herself, with her own passions, her own, the things that make her happy versus pushing them aside, versus cutting them out of herself, box cutter. So you have Utsumi being, this actual aspect of the character Akane. And then Hibiki, again, the dream episode really kind of shows like more of like what were these expectations for these characters. With Hibiki meaning to be this character that was supposed to love the idolized version of Akane, but instead does not, and instead is more in love with Rika, who, I don't know, do we mention the last like 5 seconds of this show?
Well, yeah, because I feel like the last 5 seconds of the last shot of the series, like, because it's again another thing why it feels so weird that it's like again from an outsider, that this not only has a sequel but also is like connected to a wider Gridman universe, because it's like the literal final shot is a live action Akane waking up out of bed and finally getting up ready to go out, and you see live action Akane and it's like, oh, that's Rika, and it's like,
it's just Rika.
Rika is her self-insert, and it's like,
I wouldn't put it so much her self-insert. Akane is the self-insert. Rika is actually more of a rejection of her actual self, and to me, I feel that's where you get the motivation, where you get why does Rika, despite all the awfulness, despite all of the, violence that Akane, puts on towards the Gridman Alliance, why they keep coming back to save her, is because they're already rejected aspects of Akane's personality. Like, there's a reason they hang out in Junk, a secondhand shop. These are rejects. These are parts of Akane that she doesn't want, that she is not engaging with, and thus these are the parts of her that are going to be the most helpful in saving her, in shattering the idolized form of her, and instead helping her accept the actual form of her, in how she actually looks, in how she actually feels. Because Rika feels more like Rika becomes this character where she's what Akane feels other people feel she should be. It's how she looks, but it is also how she should act. It's how she is received in school versus how she's assumed to actually be treated in school. Again, we're not given the specifics, but it doesn't matter. Instead, it's the fact that you have this idolized version of a character versus a more like realistic version of this character, and then having those two come together. Like, usually, I mean, that's a very good metaphor for internal stress, is like, you know, the dissonance of an idolized self versus the actual self. You know, we've all had those moments where it's like, oh, I should have said this, I should have done that. Like, that right there is a separation of who you believe you should be and who you are and what you've done. And so then that's where like Gridman gets super interesting, because the battles start to become that. They stop becoming Gridman beam into a fire dragon, and they instead become these aspects of a girl trying to help her accept herself. And so I feel that's where you get that motivation, as opposed to, and I know it sucks because it does a disservice, because you have to, in order to use that framework, you have to chip away at these characters as characters. And I know that sucks, and I know that's like not constructive and is not the best answer for trying to like prop up characters. But I feel like once you kind of set them in those roles as like, oh, these are aspects, and then once you have these aspects, like, oh, that's why they're so relentless in trying to, you know, save Akane, and trying to, because even when they say they're saving Akane, it doesn't necessarily mean they're trying to save, you know, pink-haired girl. They're trying to save the big girl up top. And so how do you do that? By, you know, reaching out to this idolized form that is still not happy with itself. That's the thing that's so interesting about the Akane character too. She's not happy with this world. She's not happy with herself. She's not happy with the situation, when it's all completely within her control. Entirely within her control. And she's still completely unsatisfied with it. And it's not until she traps these aspects that would probably be the most helpful in helping her like make friends and be cool and like talk to people. But those are the parts that she like shoves away, that she like is trying to literally stab out of her, and they fight back. And I think again that's where I start to get this greater appreciation of the Gridman franchise, of the Gridman characters as well, because even that whole idea of like an idolized doppelganger, that's still in the original Hyper Agent, because like halfway through the series, Takeshi, there's a moment where a new character shows up and starts hanging out with the Gridman Alliance, and he looks just like Takeshi. His name's even similar. It's Takeo, and he looks like him. He's rich like him, but he's nice and friendly, and he's able to be super best cool friends with the Gridman Alliance. And it's meant to be this, again, the dissonance. It's this idea that this is the person you could have been, and then here's this person you are, and why aren't you that person that could be more connected to others? And it's also where we get our box cutter reference, because for a middle schooler, he goes whole ham on wanting to stab another child to death just because he makes better friends than him. But I think it ends up being, again, like just more of a projection of himself. Like, Takeo isn't a real person. It's these ideals and these things that this character has put together to be like, no, this is who I am. When it's not. It's not.
and I think that is basically like the ultimate paradox, I feel like, of Gridman, is that, again, like when you're reading through the story from the perspective of Akane, that everybody is just a piece of Akane, and all what the characters do is to support Akane and like saving her soul. And it's like, yeah, I think all of that is done and put together perfectly and beautifully and very eloquently. But then you also have the thing of, like, you also have to remember that this is still in the Gridman world. These are still their own characters beyond just Akane. So you have to read these characters as, especially when you have, like, again, I haven't seen Dynazenon yet, so I don't know what happens, but I do know that they're that they are going to be following it up with a Gridman X Dynazenon. So these characters are going to come back, and I assume that Akane is probably not going to be in it, because I don't know how you put Akane back in it after the way this ended. Like, a satisfying way to put Akane back without kind of crapping
Well,
on
you'd
the
be
ending.
surprised. You'd be surprised. I mean, I mentioned Boys Invent Great Heroes at the very very beginning of this, but in that takes place 22 years after the original Hyper Agent series, and it actually stars Takeshi in a grown up form, like completely rehabilitated, and he turns into Gridman. He turns into Gridman Sigma because again, I think it's super cool that they took cut content and decided to make it part of the four S's universe. But I mean, it's happened before where they'll bring a Gridman villain back, and he's rehabilitated, and he's made friendship, and now he can be Gridman.
Well, it's more so the difference is that the whole thing, like, Akane's whole thing is that she needs to let go of this world and, like, go back to her own world. She can't just stay trapped in this, like, in her world. She needs to go to back to her world. So it's like, if she comes back, even if she comes back rehabilitated, like, what does that mean? Is she just, like, reverting back into herself to come to this world? Like, again, it's like, just the way the metaphors work is just, it feels confusing. And then, yeah, so when those characters come back, it's like those characters are going to be back on their own, separate from Akane. So it's like, okay, how is that going to work? Like, it'll be interesting because, again, we get to see them beyond the metaphor and, like, see if they develop as much more standalone characters. But then again, it's just the whole thing of, like, yeah, when you need, because it really is like it's kind of way in a weird way, the Gridman, at least to me, the Gridman name kind of weighs the series down a bit, because it's like, oh, like, you, like, again, like, that go back to the, like, the actual ending is Akane waking up, so just being like, oh, it was all a dream. And it's like, well, some people would be like, oh, that's bad, but it's like, for this, like, no, that's very good. It's like, it's very David Lynchian of, like, oh, this entire story has been just a manifestation of, yeah, her inner thoughts fighting with each other, and it's just one giant symbolism, and it works very, very effectively. But it's like, the fact that this is part of a franchise means that, oh, the characters all have to be able to stand on their own, not just connected to Akane's story, and I don't think a lot of them really do, so it kind of falls flat.
Yeah.
Again, like, Rika's relationship with Akane, when looked at it from the perspective of, yeah, that Rika is that part of Akane that she rejected, and it's her reaccepting herself, then it's like, yeah, that is very, even after being pushed away so many times, that's very effective, that's very powerful. But when you look at it as two girls coming together as friends, which it is very clearly also
in lesbians,
trying to be lesbians, but it's like, again, not as good as it could have been. Again, it's funniest being like, oh, that Loki gets accused of being self-cessed, but it's like, everybody loves Rika and Akane, and it's like, that is also very clearly self-cessed.
It's literally,
it's
like,
self-cessed
I know I got all mad
weird.
at Franks for not being gay enough, but Gridman, I mean, it doesn't even need to be. It's there, like I said, there's only one, technically two characters in this show.
It's also weird because, honestly, the weirdest thing, because I was expecting Akane and Rika to be much more prominent than it actually ended up being. So I was also surprised when it's like Hibiki constantly, like, looking at, like, his clear, like, jealousy and attraction to Rika was just kind of like a weird thing of, like, huh? Because it keeps happening, like, sporadically throughout the series, and I'm like, is this going to go anywhere? And then it never really goes anywhere until the ending, where it was like, because, again, something we didn't also mention is that the amnesiac Hibiki turns out to actually just be half of Gridman that possessed Hibiki, and then forgot that he was the second half of Gridman. So, like, so technically the Hibiki that we've seen in this series is not actually the real Hibiki. It's just
Gridman the whole time. We actually barely get any, like, interaction with the actual Yuta Hibiki.
Yeah, and then the series kind of ends with because like there's the whole thing of, like, the implication is that, like, when they were like, oh, why did Gridman possess Hibiki? And then they're like, oh, they're like, oh, maybe because he sits beside Akane, and they're like, is that really the reason? And then they kind of imply that it's like, oh, the one reason is because he's friends with Utsumi, and it's like, oh, Utsumi's the big Ultraman fan, so he can understand it. And then the other implication,
that's giving him his purpose.
And then the implication seems to be that Hibiki has a crush on Rika, and since Rika has junk, that's their, and junk slash has her connection to Akane, that was also why he possessed her. Because like it's like the last thing that happens is like them mentioning that, oh yeah, he has a crush on you, and they're like, she's like, what, and then he leaves. So it's like, I assume like the implication was that, oh, like he possessed her because he knew that he had a crush on her, so that was their way to get close to her.
It could also tie into, again, with Rika being, you know, the rejected, more reality base of Akane. It could also be that because he likes her. I mean, think of it that way too. He's an aspect of Akane that likes the part of Akane that Akane doesn't like. I know I just used that. It stops becoming a word if you say it enough times, but I think it can also tie into that because, again, when they're in the dream sequence with Hibiki, Akane tries just to rip Rika's life, or, you know, it could be that that's actually what real life Akane's life is more like, and she's actually getting suited back into what should really be her life. But yeah, but instead Hibiki rejects the idolized Akane and is more in love again with the more grounded in reality version of her, like how any other human connection is. When other people don't like you for your fake shit, but instead actually like you for your weird shit, for your flaws, and you're actually able to connect despite those things and are still able to have interactions despite this. So, like I said, it sends the show kind of into a spiral when you get that way, but to me, I felt like it opened up the show, because I was having a lot of the same issues with you as well, where it was like, I feel like I'm only getting half a story here, or like I'm getting characters that are kind of partially motivated. But it was once I was able to kind of like look at this as like, okay, these are metaphorical characters, like that, then I was able to have a lot of fun with that. But like you said as well, these are now characters in a franchise though. Like, heck, as opposed to like with Frank's, how, you know, Trigger has kind of forgotten it. Gridman, even within the last couple of years that's been released, has appeared in lots of other media. And when they do that, they tend to have it as, you know, the Gridman Alliance team. So you'll have Rika and Utsumi telling Gridman to do certain attacks. So like the characters are there. They exist. But yeah, it'd be really weird to kind of see what they'll have to do if they try to like bring back these characters in any sense. Like I said, I think the only character that has any like chance is gonna be like a wholly complete Akane that, like, I don't know, may remember the Gridman Alliance, but I don't see the Gridman Alliance coming back as like people, as actual characters. But yeah, no, it would really just be her versus, you know, the Gridman that was in Yuta's body, as well as the junior high students. Let's remember that. Like, Gridman's character is so weird in this show because half of him is in the computer. That's the blue half. And then half of him is in Yuta's body. And then another third of him is split amongst the 4 junior high students. So it's like Gridman's all over the place. And like even like what his backstory and like what he is gets a little fuzzy, because in Cyber Agent, it makes sense. He's on the internet. He's a cop from the internet, and he's there to save the internet computer world. Versus in 4S's, we know we're in a dream. How did a computer cop get into her dream? And all those questions. And I've seen some explanations where it's like, you know, the hyper agents are able to police in all worlds, even if these are worlds that are created by children in their mind. Like, these worlds still exist. So I've seen all kinds of the theories, but it like you said, it just adds more confusion when you try to, you know, have the metaphor but also have the grounded events that are like shown.
Especially because, again, the literal final shot is live action. It's real life physical Akane. I don't know who, like, the woman, like, the I don't know.
It's beautiful.
I don't know if that's Akane's VA or Rika's VA or like somebody, but it's, again, whoever it is Akane in the real world. So it's like, again, like, I don't know how you could ever bring Akane back into the story without doing some implication that, oh, that now that she's retreated back into herself for some reason. It's like they have so clearly, like, through both the text and the metaphor, established this separation between the Gridman world and Akane, that it's like there isn't really a way to bring her back without kind of undoing some of the like thematic poignance of like where the story like concluded, and what the point is.
It doesn't even conclude just right there either. Did you know that the music video for the main theme Union starts at that scene? It actually starts at Rika, or at Akane waking up, and then her like going through her whole morning and like meeting up with friends. Like,
I didn't know that.
The plot continues.
I didn't know that.
That's not the last scene.
Okay, I didn't know that. What the hell? You can't just continue your series in a music video?
Yes, you can. Please. Like, I'm still waiting for Nomura and Taru to like pull that shit on us.
Although it is funny that, I mean, like, so that means the Union music video is like just a huge spoiler. Like, I guess if you just watch it like without any context, you might not actually like get it. But it's like, I mean, I don't know how the music video actually goes, but I'm like, I wonder if it's just like a giant like accidental spoiler if you just watch it before watch Gridman for whatever reason.
Right. But no, speaking of openings, let's real quick. So we've talked about how the show introduces like the whole cycle of the kaijus. We get told that, you know, we're in God's world and God is mad, and then God tries to put us into a sleepy spell, but we're not gonna have it. We break out, and then I just to point out, just because it was probably my favorite kaiju in the show, I loved the kaiju. It's called Anonymous, the one that like the second to last one that she makes, how it's in like another kaiju skin, and you can see, because it has a pointy head, you can see on that kaiju how it has like this like giant pointy like growth on its shoulder. And then when Akane just like full blown just freaks and is done, you have this like really wibbly wobbly fast kaiju just break out of another body, and it murders all of the gas kaijus that were like keeping the status quo and like keeping everything good and clear. I love that one. I just because that one was also just the way that kaiju was designed as well. Still looked like a guy in a costume, but also looked like the most like not like a guy in a costume. Like, it didn't move like how someone in the 90s on a TV set would move, and it's probably one of my favorite. But you know, you get that kaiju, Gridman beats up that one, and like you said, we get to a part where Kane is like, I ain't making no more kaiju, like I'm done, like we're not playing this game anymore. And so she gets turned into a kaiju, and Grid Knight has to be the one to save her, which super cool, super touching. Like you said, it gives Anti the best like redemption story in like a 12 episode show. But eventually her demons just decide, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna possess you, and I'm just gonna make myself the biggest kaiju ever. And then so you have the big fight in the city in the sky. That, you know, looks like the computer world of the cyber of Hyper Agent.
I have to reference a quote that I saw on YouTube of people being like, it was like around, it was a comment I saw, and like people, it's like people when they saw Gridman was coming out, okay, good, Trigger isn't gonna have the final battle take place in space. Trigger, cyberspace, fuck.
Basically, because, you know, you have the whole, you know, the city in the sky, very much like Digimon, and just the whole cyber city, which, here was the thing that shocked me the most. I was prepared to like have my perspective on things change by, you know, going back and watching old tokusatsu shows. The thing that I was not prepared for was for my opinion of Summer Wars to be changed, because holy shit, having watched Gridman now, and having watched an entire series of, oh hey, we're gonna send a monster that can attack basically computers from the inside and is going to destroy the day-to-day lives of Japan by attacking computers, it sounded really similar to an AI program launching nukes on a Japanese family. It gave me the biggest shock that Summer Wars is actually a Gridman show. Like, come on, how blew my mind. Absolutely was shocked. But no, so you have that final battle in the cyberspace city. You know, it looks just like the show. Although, to be fair, the anime always looks like the show. And then you have the moment where he's losing power. He's at his weakest, which is also referenced to Cyber Agents, because in that one, all of the power ups get destroyed. So he has a sword, he has a sword and shield that he gets to keep, but his drills, his punchy arms, his dragon cannon, his T-Rex buddy, they all get destroyed in the final battle. So he's basically stripped down to the basic bare form of Gridman, and he has to fight, and he ends up winning. So what does Trigger do? Well, they decide to pull the ultimate evolution of the SA2, where, you have the final battle. It's triumphant. You're going to take down the final boss, but rather than playing the main theme, they go and play the original theme, and they pull out Yume no Hero out of nowhere, turn Gridman into his original form like he was in the TV show, and he just beats the shit out of him, and it's such a good moment. It's so good. It really is the moment Trigger saved anime.
Yeah, even as me, it's like, I could, like, when he comes out, when he becomes super powerful, and I'm like, hey, he's Ultraman, yay! And just hearing the theme come on, I'm like, yeah, it's cool, and you have all the people, like, seeing the cyberspace, cheering him on. You have, like, the whole thing where it's like his ultimate power is the Fixer Beam, and it's like, oh, the ultimate power of Gridman is the power to fix and heal, and it's like, yeah, it's like such a smart. And it's like that's when you have the reveal of what the SSSS means, and then it's like, oh, it's like, and it fits together, and it fits so well. Also, really, I want to mention something that happens like a little bit before that. There are two characters that are like, they're very minor characters, but I actually really like them. It's Rika's two friends who in the English dub are voiced by Sarah Wiedenheft and Amber Lee Connors. Because like I recognize those two voices like automatically, so like I was automatically, once I hear them, my eyes are on them, and it's like every time because they, like, on the surface, I mean they are just like the general, like, I mean they're the other character, like they're the characters for Rika just to be around. It's like they don't really have like the in-depth personality.
They're actually just Akane.
They don't have in-depth personalities. They're just like they are just like the fun kind of standard like high school characters that you would see in like any number high school like anime as just like the random supporting cast. But it's like, it feels like in a series like this where again the cast is so small, it's like characters like that who are just friendly for the sake, like who just they appear just friendly for the sake of friendly, that it kind of, in a weird way, kind of feels like a breath of fresh air of just, oh, these characters that like in this world that is like shaped by Akane, they kind of like, they feel like they're like the outsiders that somehow came in of just, oh, we're just living our lives just being friendly with Rika and whoever, because we like them and we want to see them be happy, because you have that scene like at the like it's probably like one of like of all like the powerful like moments in the series. One of the lines that always like stuck out to me was when Rika runs away, like before shit's going down, and like one of the girls is like, oh, what's she doing? And then I think it's the girl with the Amber Lee Connors girl who wears the mask. She's basically like, she must have something going on. And it's like, aren't we gonna ask her like are we gonna ask her what's happening? And she's like, no, it's okay. It's like, well, I trust her. Like, it's like, if she, like, I trust her and I know she trusts me. So it's like, if it's something that I need to know, she'll tell me. If not, I'll just be there to support her if it needs to be. And it's just that this thing of like, oh yeah, it's kind of like the funny thing of like, oh, these characters in these anime that are just the side, that are just there just for the sake of being background characters. So it's kind of like a slight like self-acknowledgement of like, oh yeah, we aren't here to be important, but it's like, I'm here to support because I know she'll support me if if the time happens. I know she'll support me, so I'm there to support her. If she has to keep her secrets or needs to do something, then I'll let her do it. I won't like hold a grudge or anything. It's just let's just live life and be there when we need to be there for each other. It's such a small moment that I'm pretty sure nobody else pointed out or like took notice of, but I'm just like, oh, it's just a nice thing of just both characterizing them, but also kind of fitting into that overall like the thematic relevance in both Akane's story and also just the content of the Gridman itself.
So I was gonna say, think about that again from the aspect paradigm. Think of that as a part of Akane that trusts her actual real self enough that's like, go, like, to be reassured that she will be able to help herself. I know it's kind of like weird to like, she likes herself to trust herself to save herself, but it's still, again, like, it's this whole inner battle that she's going with. So I think it's also kind of fun that she does have these aspects within herself that, have faith in herself as well. That, that there's a part of her that she can still trust. And it's the part of her that she rejects, that she thinks is the part that she doesn't want to be. But it's like, no, like that's your truest self. That's the part that will help you and save you out the most. And a part of you even trusts and believes in it too. So like, have at it, feel it. But no, and like you said, like a lot of the side characters are some of the best gems in this show. Rika's mom is pretty great. She's not the best anime mom. I wouldn't even say she's the best Trigger mom, but she's a cool mom. My favorite is the reference that her earring. She has Midoriya's eyeball. Anytime we're gonna have a Luluco reference, like we're pointing that out on this podcast.
I didn't realize until you pointed it out, and I went back and I'm like, oh shit, that's right. Like I meant like I heard Rika listens to the Inferno Cop theme for like 2 seconds, and I heard that I'm like, oh, it's that. But other than that, I couldn't think of any other, like, there weren't any other noteworthy. Like, I mean, like there's like the star. There's like all the star images that like exist all the way back to Kill la Kill. It's like, yep, I saw that. Yeah, obviously, Alexis being just over Justice 2.0. But it's like, other than those, it's like there weren't as many, at least I noticed, as many obvious Trigger references.
Well, they were busy making...
They were busy with the other references, yeah.
Literally, and Ultraman references. Dude, when I found that one video that showed that the volleyball girl, that her little charm is a Ultraman Nexus reference, like, that's when I realized that, no, everything in this show, down to the hot dog she knocks out, that gets knocked out of the hand, also a reference. Every single thing in this show, like, it blew my mind. And again, it just made me appreciate the show more, because I was like, no, I thought it was just a love letter because it referenced. It's a love letter because it's like written in blood, dude, in the blood of Gridman.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's just there's like so much that like I mentioned a couple times, it feels like they wouldn't do it. Like, it's such kind of like the weird thing of like, oh, like in series they're only going to be 12 or 24 episodes just because of the way like
seasons,
the way seasons work. But it's like, it feels like if this was like a 15 or 16 episode, like if they had just a couple more episodes to just fit in like a bit more like character stuff, I think then this would be like absolutely perfect. And it's like,
how about an audio drama?
I mean, I guess, but it's like I'd rather like
I want anime.
I watch anime. And there was one other thing that was something that we briefly mentioned, but we should probably go back to the last thing that we pretty need to talk about is the opening.
Yeah. Which again, since this is a 1-season show, we have just the one. I don't think it actually changes, because I don't think we have any like character model changes. We don't have nothing. It's just a good, solid, like, tokusatsu opening. You got the song Union, which, as all Trigger openings, there's your reference to the themings of the show and, connectivity and, having relationships with people. You should have unions, as it were.
Yeah, it is, other than Serious and Ambiguous from Kill la Kill, this is probably the best Trigger opening to me. Like, at least in terms of songs, like I would need to sit down and watch like all of the openings in a row to kind of figure out like, oh, what's the order of. But in terms of song,
stay tuned for that episode
tier list. Yeah, because I have all the songs on my phone, so I listen to the songs all the time for long drives and whatever. So like I've heard them so many times that I can be like, oh yeah, Union is like definitely up there, like as my technically third favorite, because it's like, yeah, Serious. It's funny because I was like, because I remember back in that Kill la Kill one, I was like, oh, I love Serious, and I'm like, Ambiguous is good, but now I'm like, no, I kind of think Ambiguous is maybe better now. I'm like, I've listened to that.
It happens.
I partially blame Siva Gunner for that Kill la Kill Live and Learn mix up where they combined Ambiguous and Live and Learn, and I'm like, okay, that's so good. I need to listen to Ambiguous more by itself, and I'm like, yep, that is really good. But it's like, yeah, Union is great, and it's like all of like the Trigger songs are like great, like are genuine. It's hard to rank them specifically because it's like, yeah, like the Little Witch opening is great, the Inferno Cop theme is great, the Ninja Slayer theme is great, yeah, Kisnivers is great. Kiss of Death, and it's like, yeah, they're all excellent songs, and it's just like Union just happens to be like that one. Maybe again because I've been listening to it more, and if it's like once I listen to BNA and Dynazenon, and I can like look at them all like with like I can look at it like with a bit more divorced from time, but it's like as of now, sure. Union is number 3 of like, oh, this is great. I mean, it's just great. Like I love the fast paced energy of it. I love the moments when it like slows down for a bit to do like the bridge kind of like pump, and then builds itself back up.
Right. It's like because even the show itself, because I mentioned how 4S's, instead of going for like your standard live and learn SA2 moment, they go full, what if we played Green Hill Zone during BioLizard? Like, let's play the original theme. I love that they took it to that next level, because to me, like, I feel like that's a nice, good deviation of it, like, because that way you get to have your cake and eat it. You get to have like a mini SA2 moment every episode, because Union pops in whenever Gridman does his grid beam, and then for that final battle, you know, the fact that they go all the way back and they bring Yume no Hero in, which I was like you, I love Union, still think it's a fantastic theme, and for a while it was like top 2, like that was like this is probably one of the best Trigger openings. And I was like, this is probably the best Gridman opening. But when I went back and watched a bit more of Hyper Agent and listened to Yume no Hero on repeat for about 93 times, I was like, you know what? Baby Don Don is kind of the energy I'm looking for right now. So I don't know. Like as great as Union is, I may have been swayed over to the series original theme. But that's before we get into talks about Dynazenon's theme, because oh lord, that's a theme song. And then the ED itself is really great as well. I love how the ED was used a lot on like online discourse as like as the evidence and the validation of like the Rika Akane relationship as peoples. Which again becomes null and void anyways, because they're just aspects of one person anyways. But I do like how it's a pretty simple ED as well too. It's not. I do enjoy that it's a Trigger ending that isn't just staring at the eyeballs of the female characters, because they do that a lot, and it gets a little annoying. Because look, I get it. Internet nerds love themselves like having 800 like PNG folders of images that they like took during the ED. Like, I get it. You'll love you some anime girls, but really the ED does not need to be the girl characters hanging out every time.
Yeah, and at least like for this one with the girls hanging, I mean, it's a very similar.
It helps that they're the main characters.
Yeah, and it's also similar to it feels more closer to the Frank's endings. That's like especially like because also like the Frank's endings had like the contrast of like all of the girls in like very modern settings of like these characters that we've seen them in this post-apocalypse, and now they're in like just casual Tokyo City walking around. But then with this one, it's like again it's similar, but it's like now it's just them, and then you have like Akane like singing the ending theme like while it's happening. So it's always kind of like funny when you see like I always like it when you have like the opening and endings when the characters like you see their mouths moving along to it. The Komi Can't Communicate opening. That one has like all of the like every time it cuts to a character and they're each of their mouths are like moving moving to the song, and it's like just little details like that I love. It's just like it feels like it makes the song feel like I'm always a sucker when the song feels diegetic. Beyond it's like it's like in it's like in movies whenever I'm like I kind of have like a my version of a Bechdel test is there a song in a movie that is diegetic that's not like if a famous song is playing in a movie and it's diegetic, then it passes the test, but if it's non-diegetic, then it doesn't pass the test.
Then why did you just wanted that for the soundtrack?
Yeah, it's like say something like Guardians of the Galaxy, like that one passes with flying colors because yeah, all of the songs exist in the universe, so it's like yep, it's just a little silly thing like that, just because I feel like in movies it adds to like the effectiveness of like the scene of like, oh yeah, when you're playing a song and the characters like are also listening to the song, and like it makes me like more like pumped up and into the song and the scene versus
well, because we're already so programmed to exciting moment need exciting music, but the thing is reality doesn't work that way. So when reality falls in and lines up to where exciting moment occurs while exciting music just happens to be playing, like yeah, of course, like that gives my brain every neurotransmitter it's been needing.
But yeah, I think I went through all of my points, which is yeah, I went through pretty much everything I've had to say about Gridman. If you have any lasting thoughts.
I guess really the only thing to say is to just recommend watching SS Gridman, whether or not you've seen Tokusatsu. Because again, that's the point of the show. It's meant to be your gateway into Tokusatsu, into watching giant men in spandex beat the shit out of giant men in monster suits. Like that's the whole point. And like watching in maybe you don't have to go straight into Gridman Hyper Agent just because a lot of the episodes are a little fillery. There are certain episodes that you can probably like pick out and just watch those ones instead. But like there's a whole genre out there. There's a whole history of these type shows that's like you'll find something you'll like. You'll find something just as deep as SSSS or deeper. So like I would recommend watching this show. I recommend watching this show, watching the opening every time, watching the ED every time. And then once you've watched it, like finding some other tokusatsu show and just giving it a try. And if it didn't work out for you, cool. There's more anime to watch. There's a shit ton of anime to watch.
Yeah, basically. Again, like my Gridman knowledge and like Tokusatsu was very, very very casual. So I was not expecting how thematically deep and powerful this was going to get. I think again, just on that level, there's a lot to dive. It was one where like after the series was done, I was like I had to kind of sit back for a few days, kind of like think about it, to kind of parse how I feel, because I feel like again, it is very relatable to a lot. It's something that is relatable to a lot of people, and I think a lot of people can get different readings out of it.
Especially, that's one thing that's super nice about this show is the fact that it is using a nerd favored genre to tackle an issue that is prevalent in people that would have a personality going towards those people that are into high fantasy, that are more into fantasizing a life that they could have, that they're like, oh, my life should be more like the shows I watch, and instead of engaging and improving the actual physical life that you're gonna be living here. So to me, I think that's the last clever twist on it, is the fact that this was a show inspired and in loving memory of probably the nerdiest genre in television existence, and in using that to tell a message of don't fall into isolation, don't fall into the escapism of that instead to be brave and accept aspects of yourself so that you can go out into the world and make connections and be social in that sense. So that's the other thing too that I really like, is that it's not a show being like, hey nerd, stay a nerd. It's like, no, like let's work on some stuff. Let's improve our lives and be better people. Like again, as Trigger's always want to do. So like it doesn't surprise me, but it's also very appreciated in this show.
Yeah, and it is just great being like like I've been joining on like a while. It's like I wish that the content itself was just as strong as the because usually it's funny where it's like sometimes it's usually it's like, oh, like because there is like a lot. I mean, like Kill la Kill is like probably the perfect example of a series that's its content and thematic relevance are both incredibly strong, and I think that's why it feels like, again, after all of these ones, it feels like like accidentally,
still the best.
Like, yes, you accidentally Trigger just kind of like peaked at like they've still been doing like really good stuff, but it feels like they just peaked of just did everything perfectly at first, and on rewatch it keeps getting better. Like all of the weirdness that I thought on my first watch through, like it doesn't bug me anymore.
Now they're just triggerisms, and that's what happened.
So now.
Great.
Yeah, so now it's like, yeah, which group? I think yeah, what it's trying to do and what it does do is so like it stands so well that I do think this is number 2 on that. Well, technically number 2 because Inferno Cop is still that one in like right underneath Kill la Kill of just like the fucky weirdness of it that I absolutely love. But in terms of like the form like
real anime
projects, Gridman stands right up there. And yeah, that is one where I think it is definitely worth checking out for you to even just form your own opinion and form your own feels of just like how did you relate to it? How did you understand? Like what did you take away out of the story? And I think yeah, just on that alone is like yeah, see it and be immersed in it and enjoy it because again even like if all that is too much for you still have really great action sequences that are just like, oh, you can just watch it for that if you really want to, and it's like, oh, you still might be satisfied if you like good action.
Absolutely.
All right, I think we did decent amount. I would have to say.
Yeah, I guess there's nothing really left to say, but Hyper Gridman Podcast and Beam.
So join us next-ish time where no matter how long it'll be, it'll probably just be one video of us and maybe possibly some more other people talking about Trigger's first theatrical project, Promare.
Did someone say gay firefighters?
That's my gay fire beam.
Yay!